So here's something that happened this weekend that you absolutely need to understand, because when you look at these four stories together, they tell you everything about where we are right now as a country and as a world. And I mean everything. This isn't about four separate things happening in four different places. This is about one thing. The United States is at a crossroads, and every single adversary, every single rival, every single nation that has ever questioned American power is watching to see what happens next. Let me start with Iran, because that's where the immediate danger is. On Sunday, according to Al Jazeera NPR and PBS News, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei spoke to a crowd in Tehran and issued the most direct military threat he has made in years. He said, and this is a direct quote, "If the United States attacks Iran, it will be a regional war." Not might be, not could be, will be a regional war. He said the Iranian nation will deliver a firm blow to anyone who attacks or harasses it. Now, Khamenei didn't just issue a military threat. He also made very clear what he thinks this is really about. According to multiple sources, including Al Jazeera and the Tribune, he accused the United States of wanting to seize Iran's oil and natural gas resources. He said the United States wants to devour Iran, to seize control of this country, just as they controlled it before. He was talking about the decades before the 1979 revolution, when the United States essentially controlled Iran's politics, its security, and its oil. Khamenei is saying that America wants that control back, and Iran will not allow it. And then Khamenei did something else that matters. He described the recent nationwide protests in Iran as a coup, not protests, a coup. He said it was foreign-backed sedition and that the coup was suppressed. According to CBS News and NBC News, Khamenei claimed protesters attacked government facilities and even burned copies of the Quran. He's framing economic protests as a foreign conspiracy. And in Iran, sedition charges can carry the death penalty. So that's Iran on Sunday, threatening regional war, accusing America of imperial ambitions, and characterizing domestic protesters as foreign agents deserving execution. But here's the thing, and this is where it gets really interesting. Just hours after Khamenei made these threats, President Trump told reporters at Mar-a-Lago, according to PBS News and Al Jazeera, that he hoped the United States would make a deal with Iran. He said, hopefully we'll make a deal. If we don't make a deal, then we'll find out whether or not he was right, referring to Khamenei's warning about regional war. Now think about what that means. Khamenei is saying any American attack will trigger a regional war. Trump is saying we're trying to negotiate. Both things are happening simultaneously. And according to Al Jazeera's reporting from Saturday, Trump said that Iran is seriously talking to the United States. And this came just hours after Iran's top national security official said that arrangements for negotiations were progressing. So you have threats and negotiations happening at exactly the same time. And meanwhile, NBC News and multiple other sources confirm that the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is already in the region, positioned near Iran. But wait, there's more, because Israel is deeply involved in this too. According to Israel Hayom, Reuters, and Haaretz, Israel's Army Chief Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir flew to Washington last weekend for urgent talks with senior U.S. defense officials about Iran. He met with General Dan Kane, chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, and discussed all operational options and their implications. The Jerusalem Post reports that after returning from Washington, Zamir told Israeli officials he believes a potential U.S. attack on Iran is about 2 weeks to 2 months away. Not years, not someday. 2 weeks to 2 months. And here's what makes this even more significant. According to Haaretz, Israeli officials acknowledge that even after Zamir's meetings in Washington, they still don't know what the United States will actually do. They don't know if Trump will order strikes. They don't know what those strikes would target. They don't know the timeline beyond Zamir's estimate. Only Trump knows. And Israel, which has more at stake in this than almost anyone, is being kept in the dark about the final decision. That tells you something about how closely Trump is holding his cards on this. So that's story one. Iran and the United States are simultaneously threatening war and negotiating peace, with Israel desperately trying to influence the outcome while being kept partially in the dark. That's an incredibly volatile situation. But it's not happening in isolation. Let me tell you about story two. On Saturday night, according to NBC News and the Associated Press, President Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One that the United States is starting to talk to Cuba. He said, "We're talking to the people from Cuba, the highest people in Cuba, to see what happens." Now, this comes just days after Trump signed an executive order reported by Al Jazeera and multiple other outlets threatening to impose tariffs on any country that supplies oil to Cuba. Any country. That's an effective oil blockade. And the timing of this is not accidental. Earlier this month, Trump's administration captured Venezuela's then-president, Nicolas Maduro, and cut off Venezuelan oil supplies to Cuba. Then Trump pressured Mexico to stop its oil shipments to Cuba. Now he's threatening tariffs on any other country that tries to supply Cuba with oil. According to CNN and Euronews, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum warned this could cause a humanitarian crisis. Trump's response, reported by NBC News, was, "It doesn't have to be a humanitarian crisis. I think they probably would come to us and want to make a deal." So Trump is systematically cutting off Cuba's oil, threatening anyone who helps Cuba, and then saying Cuba can avoid a humanitarian crisis by negotiating. That's coercion. That's using the threat of mass suffering to force surrender. And according to the Washington Examiner, Trump said Cuba is a failing nation and predicted the government is ready to fall. He's not trying to negotiate with Cuba's government. He's trying to collapse it. Cuba's response is worth noting. According to Al Jazeera, Cuban Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez declared an international emergency and accused the United States of seeking to strangle the Cuban economy. Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel called the Trump administration fascist, criminal, and genocidal. These are extraordinary accusations from a head of state about the United States government. So that's story two. The United States is attempting to force regime change in Cuba through an oil blockade while simultaneously claiming to be open to negotiations. But again, this isn't happening in isolation. Let me tell you about story three, because this is where you really start to see the pattern. On Sunday, according to TASS, Anadolu Agency, and China Daily, Russia's Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Beijing. And Shoigu made very clear statements about two things, Taiwan and Japan. According to TASS, Shoigu said, "We see that ill-wishers of China continue to destabilize the situation in the Taiwan Strait. For our part, I would like to reaffirm our consistent and unwavering support for Beijing on the Taiwan issue." He said Russia recognizes the government of the People's Republic of China as the sole legitimate government representing all of China. And then Shoigu said something else that's really significant. According to multiple sources, including TASS and Anadolu Agency, he said Russia is closely monitoring Japan's policy of accelerated militarization. He didn't just express concern. He described it as a policy Russia is closely monitoring. And according to China Daily and Japan Today, both Russia and China agreed to jointly oppose what they called the revival of Japanese militarism. Shoigu even said, according to TASS, that Japan is among countries that have expressed a desire for revenge for past defeats. But Moscow and China have sufficient experience in defeating it. Now, let's be very clear about what this means. Russia and China are publicly declaring that they stand together on Taiwan and that they view Japan's military modernization as a threat that requires joint action. This is not subtle. This is Russia and China announcing a coordinated response to what they see as American-backed pressure in the Asia-Pacific region. And the timing is crucial. This meeting happened on Sunday, the same day Khamenei was threatening regional war if the United States attacks Iran. And the same weekend, Trump was announcing talks with Cuba after trying to starve the island of oil. And according to Sputnik and the Chinese Foreign Ministry, Wang Yi told Shoigu that the post-war global order has been subjected to serious shocks. He said China and Russia must jointly shape a more just system of global governance. That's diplomatic language for we're building an alternative to American-led order. So now step back and look at all three of these stories together. What's the common thread? In every single case, the United States is asserting its power in ways that are generating coordinated resistance from adversaries. Iran is threatening regional war while negotiating under the shadow of an American carrier group. Cuba is facing an American oil blockade designed to collapse its government. And Russia and China are publicly declaring their joint opposition to American influence in Asia. These aren't three separate crises. This is a global pushback against American power happening simultaneously on three continents. And here's what makes this moment so dangerous. The Trump administration appears to believe it can simultaneously pressure Iran with military threats, starve Cuba into submission, confront China and Russia in Asia, and do all of this without any of these situations spiraling out of control. But what if they're wrong? What if Iran decides that negotiating under the threat of military strikes is surrender? What if Cuba decides it has nothing to lose? What if Russia and China decide this is the moment to test American resolve in Taiwan? Maximum pressure campaigns work until they don't. They work until the target decides resistance costs less than surrender. Right now, the United States is running 3 maximum pressure campaigns at once, and the targets are coordinating. Khamenei is framing American pressure as imperial ambition. Cuban leaders are calling Trump fascist. Russia and China are announcing joint opposition to American dominance. These aren't responses from governments about to cave. And there's something else we need to talk about: the lack of clarity about American strategy. Israel's army chief spent a weekend in Washington trying to figure out what the United States will do about Iran, and he still doesn't know. Cuban officials don't know what deal Trump is offering. Fox News reports that Trump declined to specify his red lines or deadlines. He's keeping everyone guessing, including America's allies. Some would call this strategic ambiguity, but there's a difference between strategic ambiguity and strategic incoherence. Strategic ambiguity is deliberately leaving intentions unclear to keep adversaries off balance. Strategic incoherence is when even your allies don't know what you're doing, when you're simultaneously threatening war and offering peace, when you're starving countries and then offering to negotiate. That's what we're seeing now. The United States is generating multiple crises simultaneously, and adversaries are watching each other and learning. Iran watches how the United States treats Cuba. Cuba watches how the United States threatens Iran. Russia and China watch both and position themselves as the alternative. This isn't three-dimensional chess. This is multiple pressure points starting to connect. The question we should be asking ourselves is not whether the United States has the capability to pressure Iran, to blockade Cuba, to confront China and Russia. Obviously, it does. The question is whether this is sustainable. Can the United States maintain this level of confrontation on multiple fronts indefinitely? What happens if one of these situations explodes? What happens if Iran decides that a regional war is preferable to surrender? What happens if China decides this is the moment to move on Taiwan while the United States is distracted in the Middle East? Because here's the thing about credibility and power. They're not the same thing. The United States has immense power, but credibility is about whether others believe you'll use that power wisely, whether you'll follow through on threats, whether you can achieve your stated objectives. And right now, the Trump administration is making a lot of threats and issuing a lot of ultimatums, but it's not clear whether it has a coherent strategy for achieving its goals without igniting conflicts that spiral beyond anyone's control. So when you look at these stories from the last 24 hours, what you're really seeing is a stress test of American power in the early 21st century. Can the United States simultaneously pressure adversaries on 3 continents, maintain alliances, avoid military conflicts, and reshape the international order in its favor? Or is this the moment when America's adversaries realize that the United States is overextended, that its threats are hollow, that there's an opportunity to push back? We're about to find out. And what happens in the next few weeks, whether Trump orders strikes on Iran or reaches a deal, whether Cuba's government falls or survives, whether Russia and China coordinate further challenges to American influence, will tell us an enormous amount about whether American power is still capable of shaping global outcomes or whether we're watching the beginning of something very different. Watch this space, because everything that happens next matters more than most people realize.